In May of 2001, I sat on the lawn beside other graduates near the Basilica at Catholic University. I had just received my doctorate. The commencement speaker challenged us that day to use our education in the service of justice and the poor. And although that was 18 years ago, I still remember how moved I was by those words. Our commencement speaker that day was Bishop Theodore McCarrick. Like many of you, I am deeply disturbed by the latest church scandals, starting with Bishop McCarrick's abuse of seminarians and a young man. All week, people have been texting me and calling me and speaking to me about the recent set of church scandals. Perhaps you've heard about the Archbishop in Australia who was arrested, the Chilean bishops the Pope fired, or perhaps the nuns who were starting their own Me Too movement, claiming some priests have abused them. These scandals, they cause us to wrestle with very important questions. And this morning I want to take up just two of them. The first is, how can we, as the good people of God, handle the scandal? The other question, of course, is why remain in this church? Another way of putting that is it possible, is it still possible to hear the good news with all this bad news? So what I want to offer you this morning are a few thoughts to help you handle this scandal. Our first response to this scandal must be the care and healing and support of the victims. The needy and the vulnerable always come first with the gospel. We should not be about cover-up and hiding and putting this aside. No, we should focus on the vulnerable, victims, and the needy. That's what the gospel calls us to do. At the same time, it is right and just for us to be angry and sad and frustrated at these events and the people involved in them. I encourage you, give yourself permission. You're not being a bad Catholic if you find yourself disturbed by these events. In fact, you're a good Catholic because you have a sense of what the gospel calls us to do and who to be. And you know that this is not what our faith is about. So it is right and just to be shocked and angry and frustrated at these events. We must remember, though, that when scandals occur, we have to remember that we live between the resurrection of Jesus and his second coming. We live between the dawning of God's new creation and the coming of the kingdom and its full realization and actualization. And this isn't just a neat theological point. You see, it means that the life and grace of heaven, of God, are being poured down upon us. But the crazy, dark, distorted forces of our world are still alive and well. And you have to hold both of them in tension. That's Christian realism. Each of us in our church is under the influence of Christ and his Spirit. and is under the influence of all the distorted ways of the world. To borrow an image from Jesus, we live in a field of wheat and weeds. Jesus is sowing that wheat. You see a lot of them showed up here today. But there's weeds. Some of them are really toxic and dangerous. So don't be surprised that there are weeds among the wheat. Be horrified, but you shouldn't be shocked. You see, the temptation is this. The temptation is to assume the church is either totally corrupt or perfect. Nah, the church is neither. You see, if you think the church is totally corrupt, if you paint a big brush and say the church committed these scandals, then you miss all the good that we do. You miss all the good the church is doing around the world. You miss, you're blind to the life of God that's pouring out upon us. And let's face it, we are the church. We didn't do any of these things. But if you think the church is perfect, then you will be shocked and disturbed and have a reason to leave when these things happen. But until Jesus reveals himself fully, we are a field of weeds and wheat. Now see what follows from this. If we are a field of weeds and wheat, then the Holy Spirit has to constantly be working, mixed metaphors here, to purify us from the poisons that leach in from the world. Every one of us came from our homes and came in here, and we brought all that stuff with us. We did. I did. And the Spirit's job is to try and help us see those weeds. See, the Spirit acts like a spotlight, because sin likes to hide the destructive things it's doing. Sin likes to cover it up, put it in the back room. And what the Spirit does is shines a spotlight on these weeds. And it's horrible when we see this, but actually, the fact that we now know that these scandals are happening, that's the work of the Spirit. That's actually a good thing, because the Spirit is starting to purify the church. And hopefully there'll be far more accountability among our bishops. So it's actually a good thing. It's disturbing. But the Spirit has to shine a spotlight on the church. Part of being a Christian is having the courage to allow that spotlight to shine on me and then look at the mirror and say, I gotta change, brother. The Spirit will shine that spotlight and give you courage. So we have to have the courage to look at this stuff and allow God to free our church of all of these weeds. Now I want to remind you that only certain people in our church are doing this. Not all of us. As I said before, we are the church and we didn't do this. So don't use the language of the church is doing this. No. Be more specific. Say certain people, certain bishops, certain members, but not the church, because we are the church. And I want you to realize that even though there's some bad news, we can still experience the good news of Jesus' life and Spirit in the midst of the bad news. As St. Paul says, where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. And don't reverse it. Don't reverse it and say, where grace abounds, sin abounds even more. No. It's where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. Now, I am concerned. I'm concerned that these scandals will drive good people from the church. It has, I know that. So I want to leave you this morning with an image that may help you to handle the scandal, maybe talk to people about this. In addition to remembering we live between times, I want you to picture a beautiful marble fountain, very large. And there's water flowing from the top of it. And on all the sides of this circular fountain, there are places where you can get a drink. And this water is cool. And when you drink this water, it refreshes you like nothing else. And when you drink this water, it rejuvenates you like nothing else. Now imagine if, as you're standing in line to get a drink, you hear that some of the people in the line, or some of the people organizing the line, have done some terrible things. Would you then just say, I'm not drinking anymore? Why would you do that? Why would you cut yourself off from this fountain? Because some people in the line, or some people organizing the line, did terrible things. You see, the church is the fountain of God's grace, pouring out of Jesus and the Spirit is God's life and God's beauty and God's meaning and God's hope for you. Don't cut yourself off for it because some of the people in the line did terrible things. That's crazy. Don't punish yourself. This is our church. Don't let them drive you from it. This is your opportunity to drink from the life of God. Don't let the bad actions of other people drive you from what you need and the world needs. See, because Jesus keeps sowing that wheat. He keeps sowing it. And he needs us to drink from that fountain so that we can turn around and help him to sow that wheat in the midst of the weeds. So, my friends, don't stop drinking. Keep drinking. If anything, these scandals have shown us how much we need to drink from God's life and get out there and help sow some wheat. Amen.